All right, Sam, this is our second Whiskey Sunday, and instead of doing a blind tasting like we did the last time with the Angel's Envy, this time we have the wonderful experience of being able to try some Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year.
Just to the audience, don't ask who he had to kill to get his hands on it.
This
It's a
is
whole saga.
This is extremely rare. It was not easy to get a hold of. This generally on the secondary market can go anywhere from $500 to $800. Needless to say, I thankfully did not have to pay that much for this. I think we can safely say neither of us have tried any of the Old Rip Van Winkle or the Pappy Van Winkle bourbon before.
Nope, never had occasion to.
Now, these are distributed through the same distillery as Buffalo Trace, which most people are going to be familiar with. The Pappy Van Winkle is going to be more heavily aged than the Old Rip Van Winkle, and apparently this is quite well sealed. Now, we have decided to do this where we open the bottle while we are being filmed, which means that everybody gets to watch as I struggle to open this very thin tab with my nails. It may result in us having to pause filming.
We can employ some editing magic until the bottle is open.
All right, I've got it. We are lucky. I managed to make this work. Now, as I was saying, the Pappy Van Winkle tends to be aged higher. The Old Rip Van Winkle will go at a 10-year and a 14-year. So this is actually the youngest of the Van Winkles.
Still, 10 year for a bourbon is still quite old.
That smells quite amazing. I will let you smell it for yourself. Now, because it is aged, it does find itself at 107 proof. So it is definitely higher than your typical bourbon. And for us, we have rather generous pours to sample this delicious treat here.
Oof.
I immediately get a very surprisingly sweet smell from it.
I get sweet, and I actually get a lot of the heat that I'm used to getting from rye. Which might be the fact that it's overproofed, or it might be...
It has...
It's a spice, but it's not cinnamon.
I would equate it more with like an allspice.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to a cinnamon, but not quite cinnamony.
Yeah, not quite as... spicy.
Wow. That is very different than any other bourbon. I get, besides the sweetness off the taste, you do feel the heat right away.
Mm-hmm.
From the overproof that you, and the similarity that you get to a rye, but I get almost a vanilla taste. A sweet, sugary...
Yeah, I can see almost a molasses type. Something fairly thick on the tongue. For me, the immediate, it was just this explosion of fruity flavors.
There's definitely a lot of fruity flavors. I really want
almost orange, which may just be because I'm remembering that it's the same distillery as Buffalo Trace with the same distributor. Because Buffalo Trace always has that orange note to me as well, so I don't know if the mash bills are similar.
I was going to say orange and cherry were the two fruits that I get upon immediately my first sip if I'm trying to isolate the fruit notes from it.
Yeah, but it's a potent orange and cherry, which is impressive because normally, you'll get fruit notes from bourbon, but it's always very, very berried. And for me, just right off the bat, it was those very fruity flavors.
And last time we did the Angel's Envy, that had that banana note, or the regular Angel's Envy in the three we did, but to get these sort of deeper fruity flavors that you get more from scotches, is very different. And that may be from the aging process.
Yeah, the brighter fruity flavors in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you spend time with it, you get a little bit of the barrel, a little bit of the woody taste, which I'm quite partial to.
Yeah, again, much like you'd get from an aged scotch that's aged in oak casks.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's delicious.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say it's a bottle I don't regret purchasing.
Yeah, and just sitting here with it on my tongue for a while, there's I get all of these little subtler notes that just continue to unpack the longer I spend with it, which is again something that you expect more from a Scotch, that kind of staying power.
What other notes are you picking up?
It's almost like a nutmeg. I get some of the vanilla that you were talking about.
Yes, and I think nutmeg is, allspice, nutmeg. And you don't...
And then a little butterscotch, which again is something I'm used to from bourbon, but it's much more... It's much, I think, in terms of color for some reason, but it's much a darker kind of butterscotch, right? It's like a deeper, richer...
A heavier.
Yeah, a richer butterscotch than the kind you normally get in like a Werther's or something.
Now, what's funny is, in looking at descriptors of how others have described this bourbon, is they've described a candy note. And I could see picking off the candy from... I don't necessarily think I would describe it as candy, like I was eating candy is so broad, but I do get the sweetness. Yeah. And that's where I could see like the caramel or the butterscotch would be how I would describe it rather than candy.
Yeah. I do enjoy the fact that, because generally I prefer bourbons with a little bite on them, so I like that it manages to straddle that line very, very effectively. It's got some of that heat, which is going to bring in somebody like me, but it's also, it handles its sweetness in ways that aren't, it's not oversweet.
It's almost like a dichotomy where you can get that sweet at the same time that you're getting a spiciness, that you're getting that almost rye-like note.
Yeah, and it rounds it out in such a way that, again, as somebody who generally tends to steer away from sweeter whiskeys, all of the sweet characteristics in this feel nuanced in a way that, I won't even say nuanced, just not oversweet, right? They're not overbearing. So again, you get the fruit, and you get a lot of the characteristics of the fruit, other than just the sweetness you normally expect from fruit. You get some of the acidity of the orange, you get some of the brightness, you get some of the zest kind of experience.
Right.
And not just the sugars.
So I think that the question is, now while a retail cost for this is actually very reasonable, it's actually less than the cask strength Angel's Envy that we had. The secondary market for this, like we discussed, is so much more because of the desirability of it, the taste, perhaps just the celebrity at this point of Pappy Van Winkle and Rip Van Winkle bourbons. Where do you rate this in the scale of bourbons? Do you put this up there as one of the best bourbons you've ever had?
It's definitely excellent, and I think particularly for people who want a really, really novel experience for bourbon, and that it tends much more in the fruity direction, whereas, and particularly the bright, the more, it gets some citrus, it gets some more acidic stuff. Like bourbon, you'll get some apple notes occasionally, but for somebody who wants a really, really unique bourbon, this is absolutely very, very high up on the list. I would say, were I in a position where I could choose between buying this on the secondary market and buying, say, Angel's Envy cask strength primary, I would go with the Angel's Envy, or if I could go with an Angel's Envy rye, right? But that's just because I prefer just A, given the price difference, and B, because I love so much all of the kind of darker flavors that you get from something like the Angel's Envy rye. This is gorgeous, though.
I would say that it is amongst, if I was just rating bourbons, not putting in scotches and everything else, and even if I were to put in scotch, Irish whiskey, I certainly, if you asked me to name a top 5, I would have to put this in the top 5, and I would put in the Angel's Envy rye, the cask strength, and then some scotches that we'll have a chance to taste on future episodes, but I don't think I could leave it out of the top 5. It'd be very hard to narrow it down to like a favorite bourbon, scotch, or whiskey.
Yeah.
But this one is absolutely delicious. There's so much to it, and for a whiskey connoisseur who's just looking to sit down and enjoy the different tasting notes, and as I just had this last sip, I had that allspice earlier. Now I can taste a bit of that nutmeg and the other spices that are coming out from it that give you the spices that are along the line of cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, that kind of fit into that spice group. This has that in there as part of where it's deriving its heat from, along with the sweetness that you get with like the caramel kind of flavor, the you described as like a dark butterscotch.
Yeah.
it's something that if one could get their hands on, I would certainly recommend doing it. Not necessarily to pay secondary market prices for it, because that definitely gets up there to only the elite of bourbon collectors. But if you are lucky enough to be in a lottery or have some other opportunity to get it, I certainly think it's something that any bourbon connoisseur who enjoys intricacies in a complex bourbon would really like.
It is absolutely worth experiencing, and it's very unique among the bourbons.
And of course, our producer, who has sat back and recorded this and made sure that the laptop that is recording the podcast for this did not cut out, will get an opportunity to try this after we finish recording, and hopefully he will appreciate it maybe not quite as much as we do, but we'll enjoy it just the same. So thank everybody for watching us again this time, and we are definitely going to not let a single drop of this bourbon go to waste. Cheers, Sam.
Cheers, Brian.
So we thank everybody for watching today. We'd love to hear what you thought. One, about what you saw today. Two, if you've actually had a chance to try the Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year, we'd certainly love to hear your thoughts. Please, if you like us, click subscribe. We have a lot more episodes coming up, different scotches, bourbons, Irish whiskeys that we'll be happy to share what our opinions are, and we'd love to hear your opinions as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.